Atlantic Ocean churns against the South Carolina coast with a fury that dates back centuries. Along the jagged shoreline of Pawleys Island, the waves crash with a rhythmic violence that sounds like a warning drum. This narrow strip of sand and maritime forest has stood as a silent witness to the rise and fall of plantation empires and the relentless march of time. Locals who have lived here for generations speak of the salty air, carrying more than just the scent of brine and decaying marsh grass. They whisper of a spectral figure that walks the dunes whenever the sky turns a bruised shade of purple and the barometric pressure begins to plummet. This is not merely a story to frighten children, but a historical account deeply woven into the fabric of the Lowcountry. Pawleys Island sits as a fragile barrier between the mainland and the endless deep blue sea. In the early 19th century, this place was a summer refuge for wealthy rice planters seeking escape from the deadly malaria that plagued the inland river deltas. The island offered fresh ocean breezes and a respite from the sweltering heat of the interior plantations. Grand timber houses rose upon the dunes, built on foundations of cedar posts to withstand the shifting sands and rising tides. These structures were monuments to a bygone era of opulence and labor. Yet they were always at the mercy of the elements. It is here, among the wind-swept sea oats and twisted live oaks, that a tragedy unfolded which would birth a legend that has persisted for over 200 years. The year was 1822, and the summer season was drawing to a close. A young man known in local lore only as the Gray Man was returning from a long journey abroad in Europe. He was the son of a prominent planter and was eager to reunite with his fiancée, who was staying at her family summer home on Pawleys Island. The separation had been long and arduous, filled with handwritten letters that took months to cross the ocean. His heart pounded with anticipation as his horse galloped along the sandy trails that wound through the dense maritime forests of the mainland. The sky above him was clear, but the air held a heavy stillness that often precedes a violent shift in the weather. As the young man approached the coast, the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the marshlands in hues of crimson and gold. He decided to take a shortcut across the marsh to reach the island before nightfall completely swallowed the light. He urged his horse forward, trusting the animal to navigate the treacherous mud flats that separated the solid ground from the barrier island. The tide was low, but the mud was deceptive, hiding pockets of instability beneath its glistening surface. In his haste to see his beloved, the young man failed to notice the subtle signs of danger that any seasoned local would have recognized immediately. The ground beneath the hooves of his horse began to give way, giving a wet, sucking sound that echoed in the silence. Panic set in as the horse thrashed wildly in the gripping mire of the quicksand. The beast reared and plunged, driving them both deeper into the suffocating sludge. The young man fought desperately to free himself and his mount, but the marsh was unforgiving and hungry. Every movement only served to entrap them further in the cold, wet grip of the earth. He shouted for help, but his voice was swallowed by the vast emptiness of the marsh and the rising sound of the wind. Within minutes, the struggle ceased. The marsh had claimed them, both leaving nothing but a disturbed patch of mud and the haunting silence of the encroaching night. He died just within sight of the island lights, where his fiancée waited. The news of his death did not reach the island immediately. His fiancée paced the wrap around porch of her family beach house, scanning the darkened causeway for any sign of his arrival. The night passed with agonizing slowness, and by morning, a strange gray mist had settled over the dunes. It was then that she saw him, or rather, she saw what she thought was him, a figure dressed in gray, standing at the edge of the dune line, looking toward the house. Relief washed over her, and she ran out to meet him, calling his name. But as she approached, the figure remained motionless, his features obscured by the swirling fog and the brim of his hat. When she reached the spot where he stood, the figure dissolved into the mist, leaving no footprints in the sand. A profound chill settled into her bones that had nothing to do with the morning air. She returned to the house shaken and pale, telling her parents of the strange encounter. Later that day, the body of her lover was discovered in the marsh preserved by the mud. The grief was devastating, but it was soon overshadowed by a terrifying realization. The sighting of the figure had not been a hallucination of grief, but a warning. That night, the winds began to howl with a ferocity that shook the sturdy cedar posts of the house. The sky turned a bruised black, and the ocean swelled to terrifying heights. A major hurricane was bearing down on the South Carolina coast, the family remembering the strange figure and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, decided to evacuate the island immediately. They packed what they could and fled to the mainland, seeking high ground away from the coast. The storm struck with apocalyptic force, flattening structures and reshaping the geography of the island. When they returned days later, they found devastation everywhere. Homes were reduced to splinters, and the landscape was unrecognizable. However, their home stood almost untouched amidst the ruin. This miraculous survival marked the beginning of the legend of the Gray Man. It became understood among the islanders that this spirit was not a malevolent force seeking revenge for his untimely death. Instead, he was a tragic guardian, eternally bound to the place where his life ended and his love waited. He appeared not to haunt, but to warn. Over the decades that followed, numerous sightings were reported, always preceding a catastrophic storm. The locals learned to respect the appearance of the silent gray figure. If he was seen walking the beach or standing in the dunes, it was time to leave without question. The Civil War brought ruin to the plantation economy, but the legend of the Gray Man endured through the Reconstruction era. In 1893, a massive hurricane known as the Sea Islands Hurricane struck the region. It was one of the deadliest storms in United States history, killing thousands of people along the coast. Prior to the storm, several residents of Pawleys Island reported seeing a man dressed in antiquated gray clothing walking along the shore. Those who heeded the silent warning and evacuated survived the storm surge that swallowed entire communities. Those who dismissed the stories as mere superstition found themselves at the mercy of the Atlantic. The 20th century brought modernization to the coast with paved roads and electricity, but the supernatural presence remained constant. In October of 1954, Hurricane Hazel was forming in the Caribbean. It would become one of the most destructive hurricanes to ever hit the North Carolina and South Carolina border. Days before the storm made landfall, a wealthy family staying on the island witnessed a man in a gray coat standing on their dune walkover. He raised a hand and pointed toward the mainland before vanishing before their eyes. The family, terrified by the apparition, packed their car and left immediately. Hurricane Hazel struck with the fury of a nuclear explosion. A storm surge of 18 feet swept over Pawleys Island, destroying nearly every house on the oceanfront. The destruction was absolute, with homes lifted from their foundations and smashed into kindling. Yet when the family who had seen the Gray Man returned, they found their home perfectly intact. Even the outdoor furniture on the porch had not been disturbed by the winds that had leveled neighboring properties. This event cemented the status of the Gray Man as a legitimate phenomenon in the eyes of the modern public. Skeptics attempted to explain away the sightings as tricks of light or mass hysteria induced by approaching storms. They argued that the combination of sea spray and low light could create pareidolia, causing people to see human shapes in the mist. However, the descriptions of the Gray Man were startlingly consistent across different eras and witnesses. He was always described as wearing a long gray frock coat, violently whipped by the wind, knee-high riding boots, and a wide-brimmed hat. He never spoke. He simply stood watch his presence, radiating a frantic urgency that compelled people to flee. In September of 1989, Hurricane Hugo roared toward Charleston and the surrounding coast. It was a Category 4 monster that would cause billions of dollars in damage. In the days leading up to landfall, a couple walking their dog on the north end of Pawleys Island saw a figure standing atop a high dune. The dog, usually aggressive toward strangers, whimpered and cowered behind its owners. The figure turned to face them, and they saw a face that was solid, yet somehow indistinct, as if viewed through a pane of old glass. The man gestured inland with a sweeping motion of his arm. The the couple feeling an intense drop in temperature. Despite the humid September heat, hurried back to their rental home. They decided to cut their vacation short and evacuate that very evening. Hugo arrived with a storm tide that decimated the coastline, toppling ancient oaks and crushing houses like toys. The couple watched the news from the safety of a hotel room in Columbia, South Carolina, seeing the devastation of the very spot they had stood upon. Once again, the legend had proven true. The gray man had walked, and those who saw him had been spared the wrath of nature. Encounters with the gray man are distinct from typical ghost stories because they lack the element of malice. Most ghost stories involve spirits trapped by anger or seeking retribution against the living. The gray man is unique in his benevolence. He seems to be a protector, a spiritual alarm system for the people of the island he once loved. Some paranormal researchers suggest that his spirit is locked in a perpetual loop, trying to save his fiancée from the storm that he believes is coming. In his mind, the storm never ends, and he must warn everyone he sees to save the woman he lost. The physical description of the gray man often includes details that are historically accurate to the 1820s. Witnesses have described the cut of his coat and the style of his cravat with surprising precision, even if they have no knowledge of fashion history. This lends a layer of credibility to the accounts. Why would a modern tourist hallucinate a specific style of riding boot from the early 19th century unless they were seeing something truly out of time? The consistency of these details defies the logic of random imagination. One particularly chilling account comes from a group of college students in the early 2000s. They were staying at a beach house during the off-season in late autumn. A tropical storm was churning far out in the Atlantic, not predicted to make landfall. While drinking on the back deck, they noticed a man walking on the beach below. They called out to him, inviting him up for a drink, thinking he was a neighbor. The man stopped and looked up at them. His face was gray and gaunt, and his eyes were dark voids. He pointed a gloved finger at the horizon and then dissipated into a swirl of sand. Sobered and terrified, the students packed their bags and drove home that night, abandoning their paid rental week. 2 days later, the tropical storm unexpectedly changed course and intensified into a hurricane. It struck the coast, directly causing significant flooding and beach erosion. The house the students had been staying in suffered severe water damage. Had they stayed, they would have been trapped on the island without power or supplies. The gray man had once again interceded, saving lives through terror. The phenomenon is not limited to visual manifestations. Some residents claim to have heard the sound of galloping hooves on the paved roads where no horses are allowed. Others report a sudden smell of ozone and wet wool inside their sealed homes just before a hurricane warning is issued. These sensory intrusions serve the same purpose as the visual apparition. They create a primal sense of unease that drives people to seek safety. It is a psychological reflex triggered by the supernatural presence. There are those who actively seek the gray man, hoping to catch a glimpse of the legend. Paranormal investigators and thrill seekers flock to Pawleys Island during hurricane season, scanning the dunes with infrared cameras and audio recorders. However, the gray man rarely appears to those who hunt him. He seems to choose his witnesses based on necessity, or perhaps proximity to danger. He is not a spectacle to be captured on film, but a force of nature as inevitable as the tides. The lore suggests that seeing the gray man is actually a blessing, despite the fear it induces. According to local superstition, no life has ever been lost in a house where the gray man was sighted prior to a storm. Furthermore, the property itself is often spared the worst of the damage. It is as if his presence casts a protective shield over the location, creating a bubble of safety amidst the chaos of the hurricane. Real estate agents on the island even whisper about the value of homes with a history of gray man sightings. In recent years, the rapid development of the coast has threatened the solitude of the dunes where the gray man walks. High-rise condos and modern mega mansions now crowd the shoreline that was once empty marsh and sand. Yet the sightings continue. The spirit does not seem deterred by the changing landscape. He walks on concrete just as he walked on sand, appearing on the balconies of modern structures, just as he appeared on the porches of cedar shacks. His mission transcends the physical changes of the environment. A local fisherman shared a story of being out on his boat in the inlet. As the sky began to darken with an approaching squall, he saw a man standing on a sandbar that was rapidly being covered by the rising tide. Thinking it was a tourist trapped by the water, the fisherman steered his boat closer to offer rescue. As he drew near, he realized the water was already waist deep. Yet the man stood perfectly still, not fighting the current. The figure turned, and the fisherman saw the gray coat and hat. The boat engine stalled abruptly, and when the fisherman looked up again, the sandbar was empty. The engine roared back to life moments later, and the fisherman sped back to the dock terrified. That squall turned into a severe thunderstorm that spawned a waterspout which tore through the very inlet where he had been. The fisherman believes that the engine failure was the doing of the gray man, forcing him to leave the area before the waterspout struck. It is another example of the spirit intervening directly to prevent tragedy, acting as a guardian angel with a cold, dead face. The psychological impact of the gray man, legend on the community of Pawleys Island, cannot be overstated. During hurricane season, the tension is palpable. Every shadow on the dunes is scrutinized. Every shift in the wind is analyzed. The legend serves as a cultural mechanism for survival, reinforcing the importance of respecting the power of the ocean. It reminds the residents that they are living on borrowed land that can be reclaimed by the sea at any moment. Even the most rational minds find it hard to dismiss the sheer volume of testimonies. Police officers, doctors, and judges are among those who have gone on record about their encounters with the gray man. These are people with reputations to protect who have nothing to gain by spreading ghost stories. Their accounts are sober, factual, and deeply unsettled. They describe a feeling of intense sadness radiating from the figure, a sorrow so heavy it feels like a physical weight on the chest. As climate change brings more frequent and intense storms to the Atlantic coast, the legend of the gray man feels more relevant than ever. The warnings from the past echo into the future. Some wonder if his appearances will become more frequent as the storms worsen. Will he be able to save everyone? Or is he destined to watch history repeat itself over and over again? The tragedy of his existence is that he can never truly rest as long as the wind blows and the tides rise. The story of the gray man is a testament to the enduring power of love and the refusal of the human spirit to accept death. He died trying to reach the woman he loved, and in death, he continues to try to reach the living. He is a paradox, a ghost who brings life, a harbinger of doom, who ensures survival. He is as much a part of Pawleys Island as the sand and the salt. Tonight, if you find yourself walking the beaches of Pawleys Island and you see the sky turning a dark, ominous gray look toward the dunes, you might see a solitary figure watching you from the shadows of the sea oats. He will not speak and he will not harm you. But if you see him, do not linger. Do not try to take a photograph or ask him questions. Go home, pack your bags, and leave the coast behind. The gray man has given you a gift. He has given you a head start against the storm that is coming to wash the world away. The lingering dread of the encounter will stay with you long after the storm has passed. You will remember the hollow look in his eyes and the unnatural stillness of his form. You will wonder if he is still out there, standing in the rain, and the wind waiting for the next traveler to warn. And late at night, when the wind howls around the eaves of your house, you will pray that you never have to see the gray man of Pawleys Island ever again.